This is going to be an unusual segment for our podcast because obviously we normally deal with politics, but I am very into culture, pop culture, and films. And yesterday I learnt that my favourite filmmaker, an absolute master director, artist, painter, musician, practitioner of transcendental meditation, David Lynch, passed away at the age of 78. It was a big part of his identity.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he started promoting it and everything.
Just what does that mean?
The way he describes it sounds very peaceful.
Oh, okay.
Very, very peaceful. But yeah, he sadly passed away. We're not entirely sure as to why yet. It seems that he probably had, he did have emphysema. He was 78 years old. He'd been smoking since he was 8 years old, had to give it up a few years ago, and had to carry an oxygen tank around with him because of that. So given that he was living in LA, the Hollywood, the wildfires and everything, are probably a contributing factor to all of that, which, if anything, for a man whose work was so dedicated to Hollywood and looked a lot at Hollywood and California in particular, is quite fitting, almost Lynchian in a way. But I thought I would pay tribute to him because, of course, he is one of my favourite artists. I believe that art is how we reach transcendence and an expression of the deepest forms of humanity. And I feel like he was an incredible artist that not all of you may appreciate. You don't have to appreciate him, but he was controversial, he was daring, he was uncompromising, and created some art that no matter who you were, got a reaction out of you. It had some kind of effect on you. I know you've not seen
I've never seen
any of his
anything
films.
he's done.
I would highly...
I'm not saying he's good or bad.
No, I would highly recommend them. I know, Stelios, you've watched a bit of his stuff.
Yes, I have.
But I've watched quite a bit. Before I go any further, get the merch on the website. For the inauguration, we've got the Trump merch back, so you can get that while it's still there. And also, regarding Lynch himself, I have covered quite a bit of his work on the website already. Back in 2022, I got Connor to watch Mulholland Drive, one of his most famous films, which a lot of people have seen. It's kind of considered a classic. Connor did not really appreciate it very much, but it was a very good discussion.
It's my favorite of his, so Connor's wrong.
Connor is wrong about a lot of things. But I also did
that in particular.
I did a very big video with Josh talking about Twin Peaks, which is probably his most influential work that many of you will be familiar with, even if you've not actually watched it, just because it's been paid tribute and homage to and parodied so many times, because especially in the early 1990s, it was a big pop cultural force and basically changed television, influenced loads of video games, Japanese video games in particular, and changed how some people saw horror and used horror in their works. So very, very influential. That was a discussion that Josh and I had, and I think it's well worth checking those videos out if you have a membership to the website.
Before we go on,
yep.
Neo and Realist is like, for fuck's sake, Carl, go watch Twin Peaks or Mulholland Drive. There's so much slop today. You should see those.
Yes.
All right,
Again,
I don't know.
Not to be too hyperbolic, he was like a real author, an artist, and his films occupy a strange space where they're not fully art films. Mm-hmm. I mean, he made art films, but his big feature productions were not fully art films. There are characters that you can get invested in, there are linear narratives that you can follow, but they're also not really mainstream. The most mainstream he ever got was Elephant Man and Dune.
Dune?
Oh,
Dune.
Yeah.
Oh, what, the 70s Dune?
The 80s one.
Oh, the 80s one. Yeah, no, I have seen.
Yeah.
I love that film.
Yeah, I think it's great. A lot of people...
Brilliant.
I mean, he hated it. He disavowed it.
Really?
Yeah, but that's what artists do.
Well,
the one film of his I've actually seen and liked, he's like, no, I hate that.
Well, it's because there was a lot of studio meddling. They didn't want him to get his full vision out, and there was like a 4-hour cut that was going to be his cut, and then they said, no, you need to cut an hour and a half out of it, which is why the last third of the film feels so truncated compared to the first parts of it.
His Dune was great because it's like it's
a fever dream.
Yeah, it's a total fever dream. It's really wacky, and it feels like a strange and unusual place, which is what you want Arrakis to feel like.
Well, I mean, that was the thing that appealed to me most about the films when I first started watching them, was that he had a vision and was able to craft an atmosphere. Unlike any other filmmaker that I've seen, there have been a lot of imitators, but nobody's really been able to capture that same feeling, which is why it was deemed Lynchian, which is the term that you hear a lot. And interestingly enough, do you know what he turned down to do Dune instead? He was originally offered by George Lucas himself Return of the Jedi.
Probably a good thing.
Yeah. Supposedly, he heard about the Ewoks and said, nope,
Really?
nope, I'm not going to do that. But yes, sadly, I learned that he died yesterday, and there has been an outpouring of tributes, which in a way has been quite heartwarming to see. A lot of people paying tribute to his life and his work, the man himself, his attitudes towards life, and it's kind of bridged the divide in politics, because there have been people that I've seen on the left and on the right both paying tribute to his works, because he was a truly American artist, one of the last of his kinds, kind of a throwback to an older age where he was a full-on Montana-born, Midwestern golly gee whiz type. He would say things like, that's swell, and he had a very, very chipper attitude. But one of the things that made his work so endearing and enigmatic was that he was able to marry the beauty of life and the positive things in life with that dark and disturbing atmosphere that you find underneath everything. Because the kind of films that he made are not the kind of films that you would expect a guy like him to make if you'd just seen an interview with him, where he comes across really chipper and friendly and upbeat all of the time. But he was in touch with the darker...
Just produces really bizarre and
otherworldly and
Yes.
There's a kind of psychological
Dreamlike.
menace
Yeah.
that underneath the
Right.
atmosphere.
And it became his calling card, especially in some of his later films, like when Twin Peaks, when that progressed further, and when you get to Lost Highway, Mulholland Drive. Inland Empire, in particular, is a very, very challenging film. Not one that I would recommend anybody to watch as their first introduction, but then at the same time was able to make a Disney film called The Straight Story, which is really heartwarming about a man who finds out his brother is dying, who's lost contact with for years, so takes a lawnmower and rides it all the way across America just so he can see his brother for the last time.
Is that not a bad way of getting across America?
The character's very, very poor, so it's the best that he can do. And again, it's this interesting dynamic that is expressed throughout his films, which I think it expressed some of the depth of character of the man himself, and also allowed his films to speak to people of many different walks of life. Although one of the best reactions that I saw so far was just, why can it never be Woody Allen or Roman Polanski?
I'm sure it will eventually be them.
It will eventually, but why does it have to be the good ones first?
So is this one of those rare Hollywood directors who is not a nonce then?
It seems so.
Wow.
In fact, he was quite the ladies' man.
Oh, okay.
And every single actor you see talk about him talks about what a positive experience they have with him. And all of the women who talk about him, who work with him, seem to have basically just fallen in love with him
Oh.
as well, which is quite sweet.
Yeah.
Because he seemed to have a sort of aura that that made the women feel like they were the only woman in the world and the most special woman in the world. There was an interesting thing, I didn't include it in this, but there's a very famous scene from Mulholland Drive. You'll remember it, the Denny's scene, I think it is, where he goes to the back of the Denny's and there's the hobo monster that pops out from behind. And there was an interview conducted with the woman who played it. And they asked her, what was the direction you were given for being scary like that? And she goes, well, we were trying to figure out what kind of face that I should pull. And it just wasn't working. We did all these different takes. And eventually I was talking with David. And, he was really hot. So I was giving him googly eyes. And he looked at me and said, that's the face. That right there. And they asked him, wait, so you were pulling sex eyes in that take? And she's like, yep.
Okay.
It's very, very strange to see a guy like that have such positive attention from women. But hey, some guys have game.
Yeah.
Right. But there is some sadness that comes with this, and I don't want to dwell on the sadness because he seemed like such a positive person, and I don't think he would want people to weep over him or anything. But there is some sadness that after he did the third series of Twin Peaks in 2017, he mainly dedicated himself to producing music and paintings. But he did have other ideas for films and television series, which he was trying to work with Netflix to produce. And last year, he was giving interviews where he said that just Netflix had just rejected most of them. Rejected all of them, in fact. He was going to try and make...
Netflix for you. And...
Yeah. He was going to try and make a film called Snoot World, which was going to be an animated, family-friendly project. but they just rejected it. He'd also been working on a television series called Unrecorded Night that they also rejected as well. So while Netflix is greenlighting who knows how much absolute shit that goes on the platform, they have access to one of the last great, unique American artists and directors, and they say, no, just no.
Because
he's not gay enough.
It didn't tick the boxes.
Yeah.
It's just sad to see that had people been more in line with his vision, that we could have gotten more from the man. But what we did get was fantastic. And again, to go through the tributes now, it was remarkable, the range of people who came out paying tribute to the man all day yesterday, going into today as well. So, you expect somebody who's like considered artsy, unusual, eccentric and strange to get leftist attention because they like being film buffs and they like projecting themselves as like, oh, I'm the media literate person.
They like auteurs.
Right? So you get people like ContraPoints coming out with this, which is a still from Mulholland Drive. Very sad. But then... Oh, go on.
No, this is one of my favorite scenes from the movie, where they're at the Silencio.
Yeah, Club
also
Silencio.
Naomi Watts here, I think, is just excellent. I think that was the movie that changed her career.
Yes,
am I wrong?
She attributes all of her success to the fact that he cast her in there.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know how difficult that is in her case, but the way David Lynch portrays her in that movie is like she oozes femininity.
Yeah, there's
very distinct.
There's vulnerability, there's bitterness, there's spitefulness, all of the female attributes. Also, I guess niceness, innocence, I suppose.
I meant in a good way. Don't get the wrong way.
But again, it's all about...
She's the damsel in distress here.
Yes, I did have an argument with my wife this morning, thank you.
You could make an argument that all of his work is about what he described Inland Empire as, which is a woman in trouble.
Yeah.
That's what he describes that film as, and I think it explains most of his work, although he was particularly enigmatic whenever anybody tried to pin him down on what his films were about and their meanings, especially the more... unusual ones, which I think is a sign of good integrity, where he had a vision and he didn't want to explain that vision because the vision was the film. You want the vision, you watch the film, and then people try and get him to put it into words, and he says the film is the words. And it makes it so that those films have this beautiful abstract ambiguity to them that I saw someone describe as no matter who you were with at the time, you would watch the film and feel like it was made for you in mind, which is really, really interesting.
Just a quick thing on that. I was on a stream with Arch yesterday. I was trying to emphasize that there was a game developer being like, what do gamers want? And it's like, like with any art, you can't do it by committee or by mechanic. Right, as in we're not asking for more numbers. What we're asking for is for you to have an idea in your head of a human experience that you want to transmit to us via the medium of the art. And this game developer's like, I don't know what gamers want. It's like, well, I agree. Yeah, exactly. What do you want? What do you want to tell us? And the answer is nothing. Of course, he doesn't have anything to tell us.
Yeah.
For him, this is a mechanical industrial process, not a work of art. And it's like, then you shouldn't even be in the industry. Get out, right? And this is the very antonym of what that person is.
I mean, it was after June that he decided he wasn't going to work within the studio system anymore. So the film he made after that was Blue Velvet, which is, again, a strange, unusual, difficult film for some. But of his more complicated films, it has a linear narrative that you can follow easily, so it makes it one of the more accessible ones. Then he kind of worked in the studio system again for Twin Peaks, because that was a television show. He got screwed over for that, so didn't ever go back to it. And it's kind of beautiful that, decades later, he managed to finish the show with its third series and make it in a really uncompromising way, because he managed to do it entirely directed and co-written by himself. 18-hour-long episodes, so it's just like an entire magnum opus of a television program, and it's fantastic. But again, you got George Alexopoulos, friend of the show, doing a portrait of the man. You get people posting clips from Twin Peaks, and this is a really beautiful one. I would play some of the clips, but I don't want to get copyrighted, sadly. But this is great because Lynch himself cast himself in Twin Peaks as a man called Gordon Cole, who has hearing issues, and he's speaking to this woman, Shelley, who's completely beautiful, obviously.
Yeah.
And because she is so beautiful and he falls so in love with her immediately, all of a sudden he's just able, unlike anybody else, he can just hear her.
Oh, that's useful.
It's very sweet as well. And then the immediate scene after, he got to kiss her, jammy bastard. It's a lot less creepy than Tarantino.
I wrote it. Yeah, I was going to say, I wrote it, so I got the thing I like.
Yeah, exactly.
Says Quentin Tarantino sucking what's-her-face's toes.
It's not as bad as that, thankfully.
Sam Hague.
Yeah, and then you get to, all of a sudden, Tom Rousel, friend of the show as well, Survive the Jive, paying tribute, saying Twin Peaks is the best television series ever made.
I have to watch it.
Yeah, Lomez saying that he's heartbroken about this, pointing out what I mentioned earlier, that his films were not art films and they weren't commercial films, they were something more unique than either of those. Lomez posting, now this is a beautiful scene, and you should watch it just for the scenes like this, because there's so much darkness and so much horror in the show, but this scene is beautiful. So again, I would play it, but copyright. The scene is this man, Major Briggs, and his son Bobby. And in the first series, Briggs comes across like this very no-nonsense military man, very cold, very detached. And Bobby is this rebellious teenager who's going down the wrong route in life. Then all of a sudden, in the second series, you get very early on, directed by Lynch himself, the scene of the two of them coming together where Briggs gives this monologue. It's beautiful, where he explains he had this vision where he was in the family home that he grew up in that had extended a little bit, but all of the rooms perfectly fit to make itself into some kind of organism. And then he gets a knock at the door, and he finds that it's his son, Bobby, and he sees that his son is living his most fulfilling and joyous life, and they embrace, and in that moment become one. And he puts it a lot nicer than I did there, but it's one of those scenes that never fails to bring a tear out of me because of how beautifully put it is. The language used in it is fantastic. And again, it's wonderful to see people posting these kinds of things because it's different. It's a break from the horror and misery that is normally my Twitter timeline. You get people as different as Bronze Age Pervert paying tribute, saying, oh no, at this awesome image of the guy lighting a cigarette. Richard Spencer posted saying one of the greats. So you can go from somebody like ContraPoints all the way to Richard Spencer, Semiogog, Geo's Content-Minded Corner. Now, this is one of my favourite little interview excerpts from him, where he talks about his debut film, Eraserhead. And he says, oh, believe it or not, Eraserhead is my most spiritual film. The interviewer, elaborate on that. No. No. Figure it out yourself.
I like that response.
Was Anthony Hopkins playing on Eraserhead?
He's an Elephant Man.
Elephant Man. Yeah,
it was, as far as I know, it was his only big film role before Silence of the Lambs, and it's a really good role. So you'd have expected him to make it big after that, but Hollywood works funny like that. Then you get The Prudentialist, and then you get Nerdrotic come out, and you get John D, who's a huge Lynch fan, posting some of the images from his films, and you can just see from here the eye that the man had for very, very striking imagery.
There's a kind of liminalness to everything that I'm seeing here, right? Everything feels like it's the threshold of something different and terrible.
Well, it's very purposefully dreamlike. Yeah. And again, something like Blue Velvet, some people think that he indulged in this love of Americana, ironically. He really didn't. He was, again, a Midwestern boy who grew up with the white picket fences. He just had an intuitive understanding that life is not all sunshine and rainbows, and understood that to have one, you cannot have one without the other, the light and the dark, and so presented that beautifully in his films.
Also, Lost Highway is a great film.
Yeah, it's awesome. Wild at Heart is one that people don't talk about as much, but they should, because it's the only film so bizarre that Nicolas Cage's performance actually fits.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, there's Willem Dafoe, by the way.
Yeah.
Yep, that's great. It's the most strange stealth retelling of The Wizard of Oz I've ever seen, or at least it pays a lot of tribute to that. Kunli Drukpa posted this, which is one of my favourite things. I say, he was this nice, kindly man. He was very upbeat and chipper. On set, he could have a bit of a temper, and it was all in service of the vision. This is just a little behind-the-scenes thing from Twin Peaks Series 3, where somebody's saying, can we cut the scene down? Scene's going on a little bit long, so he just does this.
You gonna try to do a close-up on Candy still? Or do you if you want to cut the time down,
What is this with everybody?
No.
What is it? Really?
me. It's
Why?
my fault.
I'm serious. Fucking A, man. It drives me nuts. Who gives a fucking shit how long a scene is?
Anti-Longhouse energy
Yeah,
there.
but good point. Like, if it's necessary for this thing that I'm trying to do, who cares?
Yep. Morgoth came out. I wasn't expecting Morgoth to do a little rest in peace tribute. And then you get to the people who actually worked with him. Kyle MacLachlan, whose career he made with Blue Velvet in June. Yeah. Saying about how he's going to miss his friend and how he made his career and how they were kind of kindred spirits in a way. Naomi Watts. I've seen loads of people come out and say that give tributes to him. I've not seen Laura Dern come out with one yet, but I can imagine a period of mourning because they were so close. I did my own tribute, which was that the man had incredible taste in women, which got quite a lot of likes. My biggest post in quite a while. Because of simps. Every single one of you. Although...
Oh, yeah, we're going to put the Simps in the stock.
I can't blame them. I can't blame them next
Everyone
time.
who bookmarked this tweet is going in the stock.
And then there's also the point that some people have said that, the games that he inspired as well, particularly for me, Silent Hill is one of the big ones. Silent Hill 2, very, very influenced by Lost Highway. And then, I also included some other things about his... the man himself, in his own words, some excerpts of interviews and little things that he wrote in books. Like this one's a good one where he's talking about therapy. I went to a psychiatrist once. I was doing something that had become a pattern in my life, and I thought, well, I should talk to a psychiatrist. I got to the room, I asked him, do you think that this process could in any way damage my creativity? And he said, well, David, I have to be honest, it could. So I shook his hand and left.
Base.
Yeah. There was this funny thing that he did back in 2006 where he was advertising Laura Dern's performance for Inland Empire, where to try and get attention, he just sat on the corner of a Hollywood boulevard or something with a cow to draw people's attention. And this
David Lynch sat here with a cow.
Yeah, and people went and asked him.
Hey, nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. Laura Dern.
This is apparently just for Laura Dern.
What's your name? Matt, good to see you.
My friend saw Empire.
Yeah?
I don't get the cheese thing. Did he explain it to you?
He works out of Brazil.
Cheese is made for milk. You just said.
Cheese is made from milk. Oh, okay. Get
Point
it?
well made.
You get it?
Got it. Got it.
And they're all like, I do not understand what's going on, but memorable, quirky, and importantly, entirely sincere.
Yes.
He wasn't just trying to be weird for the sake of it or be ironic. He was just like this. This was where his mind took him. During the COVID era, during those years, he took to doing daily weather reports on what the weather was like in Los Angeles.
Oh, yeah.
And this was the last one that he did in 2022.
Good morning. It's December 16, 2022, and if you
Where's the
can
audio gone?
believe it,
What?
it's a Friday once again.
The audio just cut.
I don't know why the audio cut, but he basically said, if you can believe it, it's a Friday once again. It was very, very charming little thing. And again, there's this idea that he was just ironic in what he was doing, which is completely wrong, because he did one of those Masterworks courses or whatever it was a few years ago, and there's just so much footage from that where he's talking about the films that inspired him and looking back at something as simple as It's a Wonderful Life. And as he's watching it and talking about it, he wells up a little bit. This is not the spirit of a man who's sneering at Americana and the idea of the American dream. This is a man that feels it deeply in his soul. Oh, this was a good one as well. When Lost Highway came out and Siskel and Ebert said it's a horrible film, don't watch it. He used that as two more great reasons to see.
Yeah, that's one of my criteria for choosing a movie. If establishment critics are all don't watch it, I do.
It's got to be something to it.
Yeah, and there are other wonderful interviews talking about the creative process, never really explaining himself or the meaning of his films. But I just thought, if you are a creative person, the best way to pay tribute to somebody like this, who's uncompromising, creative, sincere to a fault, is to go out and do something yourself and try to express yourself in any way you can. Even if you get false starts, that's all part of the creative process. Even if you have trouble accessing that creativity, try and put yourself in a state of mind where the ideas will come to you. And here's his advice to close this off.
And so you just stay alert, do your work, don't worry about the world going by. It doesn't mean that you can sit around and not do anything. You've got to get your butt in gear and do it. And don't take no for an answer. Translate those ideas to cinema or to a painting or to whatever. And figure out a way to get it done.
So this was a bit of an indulgent segment for me, but thank you for sitting through it. And David, thank you very much for all the art that you have left for us.
I hope you appreciated that segment from the podcast The Lotus Eaters, and if you want to see what else we're up to, you can always go to our website and look at our roundtables where we talk about hot news with all of the hosts. This one was talking about Elon on Twitter and targeting the Labour Party. And if you want to see everything else that we're posting, you can always follow us on Twitter itself. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.